Putin doesn't use a cell phone, doesn't use the internet, and only receives information about the war from a handful of people in his innermost circle. And when his own defense minister tries to warn him that Ukraine is dominating the skies with a generation of drones that Russia can't fight against, do you know what he does? Putin simply doesn't listen. The result? March of 2026 became the deadliest month of the entire war for the Russian soldiers. And the Kremlin's own propagandists, the same people who spent years glorifying the invasion, are now openly saying that the Russian offensive has reached a dead end. Something very big has changed in this war, and it starts with a technology that Russia underestimated. You might think this is just another video about drones and technology, but when you get to the end, you'll understand that what's happening is much more serious than it seems. To understand what's happening now, you need to understand one thing about the drone war in Ukraine. Since the beginning of the conflict, Ukraine has dominated both ends of the spectrum. At short range, first-person view drones have created kill zones up to 20 kilometers along the front line. Any vehicle, any soldier that enters that range becomes a target. At long range, drones travel more than 300 kilometers to hit refineries, bases, and infrastructure inside Russia itself. But there was a gap in the middle. The Russian rear area, the area between 20 and 300 kilometers from the front line. It was where Russia hid its ammunition depots, command centers, repair workshops, and supply routes. It was the logistical heart that fueled the entire offensive. Imagine a Russian ammunition depot, hidden in a forest 100 kilometers from the front, full of shells that would fuel weeks of bombardment. A Ukrainian drone arrives silently without anyone noticing, and in seconds everything turns into fire and smoke. The ammunition that would have killed hundreds of Ukrainians simply ceases to exist. That's what medium-range drones do, and Ukraine wasn't able to do this consistently until now. In 2026, Ukraine closed that gap with a new generation of medium-range drones. And the numbers show the scale of this change. In January, there were 41 medium-range attacks. In February, 61. And in March, that number jumped to 115, almost triple in just 2 months. But it's not just the medium-range drones. The Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrsky, revealed that the Unmanned Systems Forces are carrying out 11,000 combat missions per day. In March alone, more than 151,000 confirmed targets were hit by drones. An increase of 50% compared to February. 143 Russian depots and logistics facilities destroyed. 52 command posts eliminated. 20 oil, gas, and energy facilities in the rear. All out of service. These numbers are impressive. But a natural question arises. How did Ukraine manage to open these air corridors? Didn't Russia have anti-aircraft systems precisely to prevent that? They did. This is where the story gets even more interesting. Ukraine launched a deliberate campaign to hunt down and destroy Russian air defense systems. Specifically the Pantsir, the main mobile system designed to detect and shoot down low-altitude drones. Each unit of this system costs between $15 and $20 million. And according to the Alpha Special Operations Unit of the Ukrainian Security Service, elite pilots managed to neutralize approximately half of the Pantsirs that Russia had in operation between 2025 and the beginning of 2026. In March 2026 alone, 274 Russian air defense systems were hit. Defense analysts call this a fundamental change in the dynamics of the conflict. Without the Pantsirs protecting the rear, Ukrainian drones began to fly with a freedom they didn't have before. And Russia can't replace these systems at the rate they're being destroyed. But while Ukraine was opening the skies for its drones, Russia lost something it didn't even expect to lose. Since the end of 2025, Russian forces had been illegally using Starlink terminals, SpaceX's satellite internet, for communications and to control long-range drones. Smuggled terminals were even directly attached to attack drones, allowing them to fly hundreds of kilometers, bypassing Ukrainian signal jamming systems. In February 2026, everything changed. The Ukrainian Minister of Defense, Mikhailo Fedorov, negotiated with SpaceX for a verification system, basically a list of authorized terminals. All Starlink terminals in Ukrainian territory that were not on that list were deactivated. Terminals moving at more than 90 kilometers per hour were automatically blocked, preventing their use in drones. The effect was devastating. The Russian elite unit Rubicon, responsible for deep attacks with drones assisted by Starlink, stopped publishing location details of their attacks, a clear sign that it lost capability. Russian soldiers reported that they lost communication with command. One of the pioneers of military drone use in Ukraine said that the Russians were like blind kittens, not knowing what was happening to the left or right without real-time data transmission. And most seriously, Russia has no alternative. Estimates indicate that it will take at least 6 months to find a viable replacement. And this Ukrainian advantage is not just offensive. In defense, the numbers are equally impressive. Ukraine intercepted almost 3,000 Russian drones in January. In February, that number rose to 3,600, and in March, it skyrocketed to more than 33,000 Russian drones of all types destroyed. Twice as many as the previous month. The new generation of Ukrainian interceptor drones, called Sting, are operating at distances of up to 500 kilometers, taking down Shahed drones, the Iranian-made attack drones used by Russia, before they can cause any damage. The Shaheds, which are Russia's main weapon for mass attacks, are being neutralized before they can cause any damage. Russia is trying to do in the Ukrainian rear what Ukraine is doing in the Russian rear. But they're not succeeding. And now let's look at the numbers that Russia can no longer hide, no matter how hard Putin tries. March 2026 was the deadliest month of the entire war for Russian soldiers. More than 35,000 casualties confirmed on video, dead and seriously wounded. 96% caused by drones. On March 17th, Russia broke the record for casualties in a single day, 1,710 soldiers. To put it in perspective, that's more people than many small soccer stadiums can hold in a single day. Unmanned systems forces alone were responsible for 900 of those deaths. The daily average exceeded 1,140 Russian casualties per day across the entire front. But the most alarming data for the Kremlin may not be the casualties themselves, it's the math behind them. Think this through with me. If Russia is losing more than 35,000 and can recruit between 30 and 40,000 per month, what does that mean in the long run? In the first quarter of 2026, Russia recruited about 80,000 soldiers. During that time, it lost over 90,000. For the first time since the beginning of the invasion, Russia is losing more people than it can replace. The Finnish president, Alexander Stubb, summed up the situation. For every Ukrainian soldier killed, Russia loses 5 soldiers. And the territorial cost has almost tripled. More than 300 casualties per square kilometer captured in 2026, almost triple the previous year. Russia is paying more and more for less and less territory. But what I'm about to tell you now might be the most surprising fact of all. Because Ukrainian drones aren't just hitting soldiers, they're hitting Putin's wallet. At the end of March and beginning of April, Ukraine launched a series of attacks against the ports of Ust-Luga and Primorsk in the Baltic Sea, more than 1,000 kilometers from the front line. Ust-Luga was attacked at least 5 times in 10 days. Primorsk, which is one of Russia's largest oil export terminals, also had its operations suspended. Together, these 2 ports handle about 2 million barrels of oil per day, approximately 40% of Russia's maritime exports. In the week from March 22nd to 29th, total Russian oil exports fell by 43%. Only 22 tankers were dispatched, 15 fewer than usual. The estimated loss? $1 billion in lost oil revenue in a single week. All this at a time when oil prices were high because of the crisis in Iran. Russia could be making more profit than ever. Instead, it's watching its storage tanks burn. The former director of the Central Intelligence Agency, General David Petraeus, went even further, and he predicted that Ukraine will have the most important arms and military technology industry in the free world, with weekly software updates and hardware changes every few weeks. The speed of Ukrainian innovation is something that Russia, with its bureaucratic structure and resistance to change, simply cannot match. And this is where we return to the central point of this story. Because all of this, the medium-range drones, the destruction of pantsers, the Starlink jamming, the mass interception, the record casualties, the burning ports, all of this is creating an effect that Russia can no longer contain internally. The voices that Putin doesn't want to hear are getting louder and louder. The Minister of Defense, Andrei Belousov, the man Putin handpicked to modernize the Russian armed forces. According to reports circulating within the Russian High Command, he reported to the president that the drone situation is critical, that Ukraine has technological and numerical superiority, and that the new Ukrainian drones operate 24 hours a day. They are practically inaudible until the moment of impact, and Russia is largely unprepared to fight them. It's the defense minister himself saying that Russia is losing the technological war, but Belousov is not the only one. Rybar, one of the most influential military bloggers in Russia with over 1 million followers on Telegram, is openly saying that the Russian offensive is a dead end. Alexei Chadayev, who runs the Ushkuinik Center, one of the main drone development centers in Russia, stopped praising Putin to criticize the very structure of Russian society. According to him, Russia has built a feudal system, a system where those in power control everything from the top down, and those at the bottom have no room to create or innovate. And this prevents the country from keeping up with Ukrainian technological advances. Other military bloggers accuse the Russian generals on the front lines of hiding the reality from Putin so that the president can continue living in his world of illusion. And that's the detail that makes everything even more dangerous. These people are not against the war. They are propagandists who live off the war. What they're saying is that the way Putin is conducting this war is a failure. And when your own propagandists start saying that you're losing, the problem is much bigger than any external enemy. And while all these voices are trying to warn Putin, what does he do? At the end of March, the same month when Russia broke all records for casualties, Putin gave Ukraine a 2-month ultimatum to leave Donbass. The implicit threat was that Russia would attack and win, and do you want to know how? The spring offensive that Russia launched in March did not produce any real gains. In the last weeks of that month, Russia actually lost territory. And while Putin was making threats, his ports were burning, his soldiers were dying at a rate of 5 to 1, and his own defense minister was calling the situation critical. The reality is this: Ukraine has built a technological advantage that is operating in all dimensions at the same time, at the front, in the rear, in air defense, and in the Russian economy. And Russia knows it. Belousov knows, Rybar knows, the propagandists know, the generals know. The only one who seems not to know or who refuses to accept it is Putin. At the beginning of this video, I said that this story was much more serious than it seemed. And now you understand why. It's not about drones. It's about what happens when the most powerful man in a country locks himself in a bubble and refuses to listen to anyone around him. The drones are the consequence. The cause is Putin. And the big question that no one in Russia can answer is, How much longer can he keep up this denial before reality becomes impossible to ignore? Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Ukraine's technological advantage in drones is enough to change the final outcome of this war? Or can Russia still find an answer? Leave your opinion in the comments. If this video gave you a perspective you didn't have before, share it with someone who is also following this conflict. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, subscribe so you don't miss the next analyses. See you in the next video.